Deze video is mede mogelijk gemaakt door Global Joy Media Groep.
And that Andy Chu was the driver behind that? Well, they did not. So Andy Chu left. So what's going to happen to companies? If you have ideas, you're going to leave if you can't implement your ideas, right? So if companies don't understand that kind of shift of how marketing is going to be done, of how connecting with people is more important than the traditional advertising, people are going to leave. So Andy went to Puma, but I would guess Andy's going to leave Puma and he's going to become one of the most successful independent product managers of our decade. So, summary, some takeaways for marketers. Well, first one, nobody listens to advertising anymore. So if we talk about advertising, I thought the talk before was great. It's about emotions. But nobody listens to advertising, even if it's emotional. You're not going to buy because of advertising. You're going to buy because you're engaged, because you're part of something, because you're emotional, because you want to unbox a product, right? Markets are about conversations. So if marketers and brands don't start a serious, honest, transparent conversation with people, product managers don't start that conversation, well, you're not going to succeed. You might still have some time to succeed, but it won't take very long and you will be overtaken by the people who know how to do this. So Andy Chu will do that independently for whatever brand hires him. And then it's really about marketers becoming part of thinking through overall business models and how they change. So your role won't be, I don't know, this is schematizing, but to a certain extent it still is that way. That at the end you take over a product and you sell it. You bring it to the market, right? Still a bit of that role around in marketing, right? Or am I completely wrong? Still a bit of that. But what's going to happen is that we're going to have multidisciplinary teams where marketers work with technology people to see what is possible, work with finance people to see what is financeable, and they come up with incredible new business models to launch new products, not just in the traditional way of selling, but by engaging with people. And there are many, many different business models imaginable. The challenge is to generate all these and to come up with the best one, okay? So, I'll give you one more example afterwards, but the book is also coming out in Dutch, which shows that what we created is a global movement. As an independent team, without any professional support if you want, and it's coming out in Korean, it's coming out in Japanese, and so on and so on. So now let me show you one last example to wrap up. Oops. To show you how marketing is actually part of something overall changing. So Apple was mentioned before. Apple has been able to create a great brand. Apple is something you want to unbox. Who in the room has at least one Apple product? Right? Who does not have one? Shame on you, leave the room. But a lot of people would say, well, Apple is a genius in marketing, right? And they would credit the success to marketing. Well, I think they're wrong. I think marketing played an important role, but I think it's about the business model. And I'll show you with this example what's behind the success of the iPod. So let's use the canvas so I can show you how this discussion in the future around successful business models will be multidisciplinary. So what does Apple offer with the iPod iTunes? So I won't go beyond that. First thing, they offer a great product experience, which goes beyond the simply nice design tool, right? A seamless music experience. Who enjoys using their iPod? Who knows of any other MP3 player brand besides Apple? Yeah, some of you, right? Very few. Why is that? Because they changed the business model and they got people engaged. So who do they target? Well, high-end mass market. They start high-end and then they go mass market with product differentiation. But where it gets interesting is to ask yourself, well, what kind of channels do they use? That's the first step to something that is not just a marketing strategy, but a business model change. So first one is retail stores. Okay? Second one, that's the traditional one. Second one is, okay, Apple.com. Apple is a huge e-commerce company. Well, the first big strategic move where marketing was involved was when they started to decide to create Apple stores. Now imagine this. This is a hardware manufacturer, and they decide to set up their own retail stores. Is that a risky strategy? That's a terribly risky strategy, and very, 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 very costly. Now why did they do it? Because they wanted to create an experience, and they wanted to go beyond the simple product and the beautiful design. But they needed more than that. That was not sufficient, and that's not yet business model transformation. They also added this idea of the iTunes software on the device and the computer, but the iTunes store, where you can easily search, buy, and download music, and pay for it. Now that was very different from anything that existed then, because people were downloading illegally, right? So why were they able to create that? Because they went deep into the user experience. But what is so innocent over here in terms of channels has huge implications over here on the operational side and what you need in terms of activities and resources. So if this discussion within Apple wouldn't have been a holistic one, where you get different people from different parts of the organization, a multidisciplinary team to work together, this wouldn't have happened. So companies where marketing is still more or less a silo won't be able to do this. So the challenge is to break down the walls to change the business models. So let's move on, see what kind of relationship they established. You all know the book Love Mark, right? So if you're in marketing, you need to know that book. If you don't know, you're not serious marketers. That's the first one. That's the first customer relationship that they establish. But what other customer relationship does Apple establish with you iPod users? What do you think? Is it a strong relationship? Who'd say it's a very strong relationship? Okay? Probably you're thinking about brand, yeah? Well, the relationship is different. The relationship is that once you have all your music in the iTunes software, so you copy all your stuff, all your CDs, into the iTunes software and onto your iPod, there's a huge switching costs. Now switching costs means for you as a consumer, it's difficult to move to somebody else. It's doable, but it's a pain in the, you know what, right? So people don't do it, and that was a deliberate marketing strategy. They created this tight relationship. Then, how does Apple make money? What do you think? High margin hardware. So, to marketers, market share is always a very dear thing, right? Well, for Apple, it was not the most important thing at the beginning. They became dominant over time. For Apple, it was always about the high margin. So if you look at any hardware market that they move into, they don't always have the biggest market share, but they always have a disproportionate share of the profitability. So they always make most money. And at the end of the day, that's what counts. Market share, who cares? Right? So that's what they were good at. And they sell a lot of content. But that's just an annex, which they learned about. So they sold, what, 10 billion songs? But they're using that for their next strategies. Now, this is the marketing territory, right? But where you need to do the extra step is you cannot do any of this on the right-hand side if you don't do this on the left-hand side. So you need to know, well, what are the key resources? So, since we don't have that much time, I'll tell you, I won't ask you. The first one is, well, talented people, right? The designers that create the product. That's straightforward. Then you need the iPod hardware, you need the iTunes software.